This is Desalini, and welcome to episode 28 of 90s Overlooked Underheard. Welcome back. Yeah. Okay. I hesitate to introduce this episode as kind of slowcore part 2. Yeah, after talking about Rex and Low a couple of episodes back. But at the very least, today's albums could broadly be considered to be in a similar vein to those, at least in terms of feel, I think. Less hurried, more kind of hushed, more contemplative music. But they both employ a very distinct and different musical palette, I think, to achieve the same feel. Anyway, yeah, let's get on with it. And the first album today is the self-titled debut album by Mark Hollis, released on the 26th of January, 1998. So yes, Mark Hollis, this may have been his first and only solo recording, but that came after a decade as the singer, the leader, the main songwriter of the band Talk Talk. So in case you're unaware of them, Talk Talk were a remarkable band. And over the course of 5 albums, I have them here, released between 1982 and 1991 when they disbanded, they evolved from kind of a new wave kind of synthy group into a kind of much freer, jazzier kind of improvisational kind of more experimental outfit, which I think many now consider to be kind of the template, one of the first groups to kind of stake out to seed that territory that would become a strand of the post-rock sound of the 90s. Yeah, I just pulled those 5 CDs up, and there aren't that many bands I can think of where I can pretty much unreservedly recommend you just acquaint yourself with their entire back catalogue if you don't know it, from start to finish, from finish to start, if you like. I mean, from the very smart kind of synthy, new wavy kind of sounds of their debut album, The Party's Over. They were signed as some kind of Duran Duran-like band at that time. Right through to the kind of, the really expansive kind of jazzy ambience, the breathy kind of impressionistic breadth of their final album, Laughingstock. I mean, check out the track New Grass if you really just want to dive straight into one song. Yeah, it's all good. And over the course of those 5 albums, for me, it's literally one of the most satisfying and wonderful, magical transformations of a band you'll ever encounter. Throughout it all, Mark and the band, I think Mark was the principal songwriter, really. He was just a very smart, very natural songwriter of, supremely catchy, but, emotional songs, big songs. Think It's My Life, think Life's What You Make It. And as the band kind of developed from album to album, Mark slowly kind of opened up. And they started as a group learning the beauty, the joy of kind of letting go, letting things happen, and just being there to catch them. It was this rejection of kind of pure musicianship and kind of, embracing the moment, looking for that time when the right sounds emerge, be that something simple or otherwise. Mark kind of, during interviews over the years, made several really kind of memorable quotes. I'll read one now. Mark said, "Before you play 2 notes, learn how to play 1, and that it's as simple as that, really. And don't play 1 note unless you've got a reason to play it." Yeah, and I think that kind of, the thought process behind that kind of just highlights the way that they transitioned into this far more kind of open, minimalistic on the surface, but, very, very improvisational, very instinctive kind of band. But today we're talking about Mark's debut, and there was a long gap between the Laughingstock album, Talk Talk's final, in 1991, and his debut solo record in 1998. Yeah, and this solo record, it dropped completely unannounced. Literally, there was nothing in the way of promotion or fanfare. One day, there was just a Mark Hollis album there. But yet, despite that gap, you still hear that kind of slow, that steady evolution, that honing of the sound in Mark's head. You can almost hear those kind of 2 notes that he was talking about contracting into 1 and then into silence. But despite the theory, the approach, whatever it was that was guiding Mark's songwriting, the constant in his music is that voice of his. This wonderful kind of room-filling, warbling kind of cry that could shrink to a near whisper and rise again, jolting you upright, imploring, kind of very soulful, a very bruised, emotional voice. Yeah, a real kind of give you goosebumps voice. Anyway, yeah, onto some key tracks. The opener, The Colour of Spring, that's the track, not the Talk Talk album of the same name. Very simple, Mark's voice and a lone kind of piano accompaniment. Just a very simple, beautiful, transcendent, emotional piece of music. Mark's voice has never, ever sounded better. And yes, some of the kind of the jazzy piano chords, some of the changes are just magic. There's this kind of almost, undetectable kind of hint of woodwind notes trying to peek through around the melody occasionally. Yeah, Mark sings, "Saw the bridges that I burnt before, one song among us all." Yeah, on Watershed, the second track, that kind of jazziness really comes to the fore. It's got these wispy kind of brushed drums and percussion framing this really kind of delicate kind of mesh of upright bass, harmonium and acoustic guitar. Yeah, partway in the drums kind of they jump up and they get really jazzy. You get this kind of Chet Bakery kind of trumpet thing emerging. And then it slides back into the ether again. Yeah, and these kind of hints of woodwind nudging in and around, some harmonica as well. It's all just really kind of beautiful, organic, soulful, simple music. And the emotion that Mark conveys just through his voice. At points, he's kind of holding it back, being as quiet as he can and then letting rip. It's just incredible. The track, A Life, 1895 to 1915, it kind of feels like the emotional centerpiece of the album. It is in the center of the record. It feels like the soul of this record. And I think this is the one that really kind of, cements the kind of the sound theory underpinning the whole recording. The dynamic range employed to record this record is more akin to something you'd hear on a classical music recording. The range has to represent everything from the very, very quietest note to the heaviest kind of crescendos. So the thing about listening to this album is you'll often hear these jarring kind of jumps in volume. And then this kind of lapse back into the silence so beloved of Mark. Yeah, it's a very, very arresting sounding record. And back to this song, yeah, it's the story of a young man's short life around the turn of the 19th century. And his death as a casualty of the Great War, dead at 20. Yeah, this one's almost a kind of a song suite, if you like, of different parts. You get that kind of questioning, kind of nervous woodwind, busying itself occasionally, prodding around at the edges of the song, sometimes rising like, birds chattering and subsiding again. Yeah, it's fantastic stuff. It's very solemn, very subtle, but sensitive and shifting kind of music. The track, The Daily Planet, is probably the most kind of strident, kind of bold song on the album, and I think it's probably the closest in feel to that final Talk Talk album, to Laughingstock. But that kind of deathly, kind of hushed intimacy still seeps into everything. Yeah, that the track is kind of infused with this sense of like, it feels like musicians circling, a microphone, only playing when moved to do so, and when the music calls on them to. Yeah, the arrival of this big kind of brassy harmonica lights a fire under the song's, latter half, only for it to kind of slowly retreat again into a kind of slithery, jazzy kind of disquiet. And the final track of the album, A New Jerusalem, I feel it revisits some of kind of the same space as that track, A Life, 1895 to 1915, from earlier on the record. But this time it tells the tale of, in the lyrics, a soldier returning alive from a war, but somehow unable to express himself, to connect with his family and with his children. Yeah, Mark sings, "Heaven burn me, should I swear to fight once more." I wonder if this song maybe, hints at Hollis's own life, at some of his choices. The parallel of him kind of returning to his family. When he left the band, when Talk Talk disbanded, he basically said he couldn't be a father and a rock star, a rock musician at the same time, and that the lifestyle that required he couldn't do anymore. He had to spend time with his children. Yeah, it hints at kind of a quieter, more contemplative, a closer existence after a time of trial and toil and upheaval. But who can tell? Either way, that track ends what is a fantastic record. I would call this one of my essential ones. I think it's just got this quiet, very solemn resonance that just sticks with you. Yeah, Mark very sadly died of cancer at the age of just 64 in February of 2019. And it's a loss that I think many people who feel and know his music still feel today. So on to today's second album, and we have Transaction de Novo by Bedhead, released on the 10th of February 1998. Yeah, so Bedhead were a band hailing from Texas, thousands of miles from that kind of London home county scene that spawned Talk, and a band who formed at pretty much exactly the same moment that Talk were dissolving in 1991. And it's very easy when you're listening to music like this to kind of draw connections, draw things that maybe aren't really there. But in so many ways, I do hear some kind of sonic, certainly a lyrical kinship, I think, between these two bands. That's there, but it's kind of quite hard to define. Yeah, Bedhead formed around the nucleus of brothers, Matt and Bubba Cadane. And for me, they have that similar sense. Maybe that's where I'm hearing some kinship. Similar sense of, a languid kind of economy and precision in their songwriting. Their instruments just lock and dovetail together almost perfectly with the minimum of fuss. Zero histrionics, very little in the way of, showiness. Yeah, the slow unfolding, I think, of a Bedhead song, of their music, it just feels kind of meticulously laid out, scripted even, where Talk were definitely leaning increasingly into a more kind of, instinctive improvisational style of putting things together. And when I use words like scripted and meticulous, that's not to say that Bedhead sound clinical or stiff. There's this kind of fragility and an openness in this sound. It's got that kind of cloudy kind of warmth that you got from the Velvet Underground post John Cale's departure. And their music is kind of rendered in a style which echoes, if you like, the kind of that intimate kind of, claustrophobic, dynamic sound of Slint. Yeah, on paper it sounds, an odd mix of kind of warmth and cool, but, the band managed to balance that perfectly, I think. But I think it's lyrically where I hear something. The two bands definitely kind of share a kind of a distance, a very kind of withdrawn, questioning kind of feel. There's like an existential focus on the idea of people being lost in a universe of kind of vast, kind of inscrutable things, but always populated with the most mundane of objects, scenery. Yeah, a good example for Bedhead is from the debut album. There's a track, Life Raft, which was from, What Fun Life Was. And we hear this lyric, "The bed at night is a life raft in the ocean of the dark. I hang my hands over the sides, pray to God knows what." Yeah, there's something in that style, that the phrasing, that so reminds me of Mark Hollis's feel and approach. Anyway, on to the album today. This is their third and their final album as Bedhead. Matt and Bubba would play together subsequently in a band called The New Year. I did talk about that in my short albums video not too long ago. Yeah, the album's produced, engineered, recorded, however he would like to have it put, by Steve Albini. And it is kind of completely, at ease with his approach, which is to record the best representation of the sound of the band live, its individual components, as they sound in the room. To get that sound onto tape with the absolute minimum of interventions, making sure that nothing gets in the way of the sound of the musicians. Okay, onto some key tracks. The opener, Exhume, it kind of builds very slowly And deliberately from a single alone kind of bass guitar with the voice coming in, instruments being added slowly, guitar, very spare but beautiful glockenspiel. And each piece, as it's added, seems to just snap perfectly into place like a jigsaw kind of taking shape. It's very careful, it's very considered, very beautiful. But, it's got some quite ghoulish, quite grisly lyrics if you actually listen. More Than Ever begins with the Cadane brothers' guitars, playing these slow single note melodies that they were kind of acclaimed for, each of them occupying, the space left by the other. A simple, a 1-2 kind of bass and snare drum pattern keeps things centered. And by the time the bass adds in and Cadane is singing, the classic kind of Bedhead style emerges, unfurls out of this song. And the guitars, they become more animated, they slip forward and back, and the drums, they snap, animate the music even more. Yeah, Parade opens with Matt's voice. It's kind of very oily, warm, close, gliding over an almost kind of waltz-like guitar riff, while the other guitar holds down this kind of single note pattern to anchor the songs like, musical progression. And it feels very hypnotic and swaying until the chorus, when the guitars, they kick up a gear and they get growly, grungy a little. In other hands, the song would be a really plodding kind of dirge. But the sensitivity, the planning, this kind of definite goal that all their music seems to have, that they just inexorably kind of slide toward. Every strike of a pick on a string, sounds as if it's been thought over and put in place. Yeah, it's pretty astonishing. Yeah, the patterns and the paths that the brothers find amongst, each other's melodies and riffs, they're just a joy to behold. And I think if I were to highlight one track, it would be this one, which kind of mirrors that slow kind of undulating kind of tension of a band like Slint. But here I feel that tension is replaced with a kind of a swelling, evolving warmth. It's just glorious. Bubba takes the lead vocal on the kind of the faltering kind of swinging kind of half thought track. But the track following that, Extra Mundane, it really kind of makes light of the idea of them being a slowcore band. It's this buoyant kind of joyous romp almost. It's got this kind of Steve Shelley kind of shakers, edging and needling and pushing the song into life. And midway, it features one of the most beautiful of the brothers' kind of these kind of yin yang kind of interlocking guitar riffs in the bridge. It's just wonderful, a beautiful little melodic construct that just quickens the pulse every time I hear it. Lepidoptera kind of revisits that very careful compositional precision that we got on the opener, Exhume. But again, this one is married to that almost kind of a waltz-like feel of the track Parade. The guitars are really dancing around each other very gracefully here. And Matt sings a moth with its dirty blown glass wings flapping in slow motion, the size of kites. It's very, very perfect, elegant, beautiful music, very poetic. And the album closes with The Present. This would be the last song that the brothers and their bandmates would, record and perform as Bedhead. And again, it just, it features the simplest of drums and of chord sequences. But the magic again is in the way that those guitars mesh together. These little kind of filigree, single note lines, weaving in and out to just create something impossibly pretty. You get these subdued little peals of feedback kind of edging away at the song, like kind of sine waves when you rub your finger around the edge of a wine glass. They just kind of hum and kind of vibrate and solidify. It's a wonderful end to what is a wonderful album, and from an always wonderful band. So there we go, another two albums that I'm very, very fond of. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and you'll come back and join me for another episode soon of 90s Overlooked Underheard. We're getting towards the end of this series, so please come back, and I'll see you again. Bye for now.